one here.
Or mine. Oh, it's all right one.
Governments are full now. So
I'm just going to get my speaker some water before I introduce her. There we are.
thank you, Helen.
Okay. Well, welcome to the fourth week, Mansfield Principals Talk. So we're halfway through, nearly. And I'm very pleased this week to have as our speaker, Professor even, I think, Nola Ishmael, OBE. When I'd just been given this job, but before I was here, I saw Nola on a television programme about the contribution of the Windrush generation to the making of the NHS. It was a programme about the 70th anniversary of the NHS. And I thought, well, that's an amazing person. This is one of the people I should get to come and give one of my talks. So she's here when we're going to just have this as a sort of conversational format to talk about her life and her generation and the contribution of people from the Caribbean to the NHS. Now, I feel actually a little bit rude, I was saying to Nola, saying she's Windrush generation, because HMS Windrush arrived in Tilbury Docks on the 22nd of June 1948 via Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, bringing about 429, in fact, I think exactly 429 people to come and work in Britain. And that was, as it happens, a fortnight before the NHS started. And there was a big recruiting drive then in the Caribbean for people to come and work in the UK where there were serious labour shortages. But Nola was only 3 then, or 4. So I think to call her Windrush generation is a little bit disrespectful. But if we take this thing in cohorts, and I see we have one of our retired geography fellows here, so I hope I'm allowed to take it in cohorts, then she was the very youngest of the Windrush generation. And so Nola, tell me about your childhood before you came to Britain.
Thank you, Helen, for inviting me, and hello to everyone. My childhood in Barbados was fun. At the age of 3, I demanded that my mother let me go to school with my sisters.
How many sisters do you have?
At that time, I think I had about 5 sisters. Later on, we had 2 more. I remember seeing my older sisters get ready for school, and I couldn't understand why I would not be allowed. So my mother said to my elder sister, Shirley, take her with you. I can't stand her crying anymore. And so we walked a good 1.5 miles to school. I got there, and the headmaster said, "Who is this?" And Shirley said she wouldn't stop crying. My mother said, "Bring her." And he said, "I can't have her. I can't have her here till she's 5. And Shirley said, "Well, I'm not taking her back." And so I was inducted into primary school. On my first day, I was allowed to sit with other 5-year-olds and listen to the teacher teach the alphabet. On day 2, I couldn't understand why they didn't know it, because I did. And so my love affair with learning started. In Barbados, there was a freedom. We gathered all sorts of fruits and ate them, and we just went to school and played. That was my childhood. Until my about my 11th birthday, I was then given the opportunity to attend an exam to go to high school. I wasn't invited to join them. My best friends had been given the forms by the headmaster, but I hadn't. So I just said to my best friend, go and get me one. And he obeyed. I went home and I told my mother, we're going to take an exam. And she said, okay. My father took me to the school the next week. I sat the exam. And lo and behold, I came above all those boys. They're still good friends. My idea of learning was get a grasp of what you're trying to learn and then apply the logic to what you're doing. My childhood in Barbados was Sunday school, church, school, playing, going to the mobile cinema. This was 1940 something. We didn't have television then. But it was truly happy. I was always looking for ways to improve my learning. So at the age of 7, my father walked with me from our village in St. Andrew to Spikestown. If you've been to Barbados, you will have heard of Spikestown, to join the library. At that time, I was allowed 3 books. By the time I got home, walking all the way back, I had read them. You'll gather I like learning.
So when you left school, then what did you do?
I left school, I became a primary school teacher.
Straight out of school?
Straight out of high school. I worked for about 18 months in that job, and then the recruiters from England came looking for nurses.
So who were the recruiters?
From the government actually sent a number of recruiters down to gather nurses to come to train. There was a big drive and an advert in the Barbados Advocate at the time. I wasn't among the first cohort, so to speak. There were others before my time. But at the time, I thought it would be an adventure to go to England. I would be able to see some of the places that I had read about and get an education at the same time, and also change my outlook. So I was interviewed by those who came to interview would-be nurses. And the first thing they told me that I had the necessary qualifications because I had done my O-levels. And they told me they would be sending me to the Isle of Wight to train.
Right.
I promptly said, why would I want to go to the Isle of Wight? Why would I leave one small island for another? I'd rather be on the mainland. They looked at their books again, and then they told me, okay, you won't be going to the Isle of Wight. My take on life at the time was pop music, learning. Cliff Richard and Cilla was still in their early years. And we were getting a lot of the information through cinemas and magazines about what was going on. And I remember listening to the song, It's My Party and I Can Cry If I Want To. Remember that? Anybody old enough? Helen? But the serious side of it, you had to study to pass the exams. There was hardly a second chance to rewrite or to do. You needed to be able to study hard, work hard, and nobody warned us about the difficulty of spelling anatomy terms. Nobody. We set up a study group, although we didn't call it that. It was a group of us trying to be able to spell difficult words like anaesthetist and the medical terms that people will struggle with, but we knew we had to know them. And so we set up a study group and we started to prepare for exams after exam after exams.
And was it a group of people from all over the place, or was everyone else from Bishop Stortford? I mean, were there people coming from other places?
We had people from Ghana, Ellen, we had Jamaican, we had Brits, and we had Trinidadians. It was a mixture of different cultures. And let me tell you, we could make some really good food on our days off. The different cultures could cook, and we had people from Singapore, and their cooking always smelled better than anybody's. It was a good mix of nurses, but the focus was learning, understanding, and making sure that our care for our patients were of the utmost quality. We were looking to ensure that we did no harm and that we helped. At the same time, we would get to go to the cinemas, sixpence, because we were nurses. And we would come to house parties in London with the blue spot raging and get back in time to be on duty, prim and proper, pristine and clear, ready for the next day. Never complaining.
Yeah. So when did you start moving, nursing in London?
I moved from Bishop Stortford to Whittington Hospital in North London, and that's where I completed my 3-year course. Whittington was different. It was in London. You had different groups of people and different classes of people. People from Archway and Holloway and Highgate and Hampstead, and the different groups of people, and the learning was different. We had senior people who looked out for us. I remember at Whittington, I was invited to sit on the nursing council. I hadn't heard of the nursing council, but I was selected to sit on the nursing council. And I thought, okay, what does one do on the nursing council? It was an opportunity to learn about what matters to our fellow students and how we would deal with new intake of students who were homesick, and how we help them to internalize the new way of working and become student nurses. You know how it is. We go in as one thing and then we become. If you see a cohort of doctors, they all dress differently on the first day, but by the end of the week, they'll all look the same. Don't they? So were we. There were opportunities to learn, write home, send pictures and photos home of how we were doing, always answering questions, always making sure that we passed our exams. Oh, that was so critical. And those who didn't, you had to be sympathetic and encouraging and supportive, helping them to study for the next time.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a long way to fly in 1963. How did you pay for it?
Oh, good question, Helen. How did we pay for it? We were selected after the interview, and the government paid for the flight. But we had to repay the government, and it was a debt that they'd never let you forget. Now remember, we weren't getting so much as a salary. Our salary was something like £4 a month. And you're going to send some of that back home. But you kept about 18 shillings, and the rest went back to your parents to help finance that bill.
Right. So you qualified as a nurse, and then what happened next?
I qualified as a nurse, and I then looked to see where I would specialize. But soon after my qualification, I moved house. And therefore, I worked as an agency nurse for a short while. And one of the places I worked at was the Maudsley Hospital in Denmark Hill in London. And I was working as a night duty staff nurse when I was encouraged and asked if I would apply for a vacant sister's post. This is 18 months after I qualified. And I didn't think, oh, I can't do that. I thought, what do I need to do to prepare for the interview? And so I had the interview, and I was appointed within 18 months of qualifying as a staff nurse. And what a difference from being one of the group of nurses now leading the same group that I had worked with. It wasn't easy.
Why not?
Come. The attitude was, do you think you know enough to be our boss? Yes, I do, I say. Yes, I do. Let me show you. It wasn't like it is today, where you can go and sit down with another senior person in the NHS and have this exploration of what is going on. I had to find ways of managing pique and resentment and not to enable people to be so hostile that I couldn't do my job. It was a lonely position. I was working in the neurosurgical unit, which meant I had a cross-section of patients. Some were private patients, and some were NHS patients. Anybody who is a nurse here will know that the observations are important. They must be taken of the patient. You can't fudge them, and you certainly can't make them up. So ensuring that all the observations were taken and charted correctly was one of my things. Checking, doing ward rounds, asking patients how they were feeling, observing those who were not too well and whether or not they were better in the morning, and looking at how patients themselves cope with illness. One particular patient had had a brain op, and she was truly ill, but every other day her church group would come in the evening to prayer with her. And I noticed that the prayer was always subdued enough not to disturb the other patients, but very focused on the patient that they were praying over. That patient got better. That patient walked out. And for me, it taught me something. Science is good. Prayer is better.
So then you had been a hospital nurse for a long time. Now, how long were you a hospital nurse for?
I would say about 10 years. And then I wanted a change. What might it be working in the community? And I met a friend who has now passed, and she was telling me about the job she was doing working with babies and mothers in the clinics and what that might mean. And so I looked into that and applied for a clinic nurse's post. Now that was my first crisis of confidence, because there I was getting a sister's salary, and now I was going back to a staff nurse. But sometimes you have to step back to run forward, I thought. And I was appointed as a clinic nurse in the Guy's Health District in Southwark. I worked with some professionally caring, understanding health visitors. They could clarify reasons behind people's behavior. I worked with school nurses who saw that every child was a precious gem to the parent. I worked with community doctors who was able to diagnose development delay of babies and encourage parents to work with them to improve the child's health. And so I was truly impressed as a clinic nurse. I worked with women who came in for their cytology test and how to handle the difficult results. That was a period of about 2 years working as a clinic nurse when a health visitor said, why don't you go and study to be a health visitor? I didn't need a second invitation. I said, what do I need to do? And so I applied to the same health district guys for sponsorship. They would pay my fees provided I was good enough to get into university or a polytech. I applied to 2 universities, and the Polytechnic of East London came back soonest. And I remember this proverb, the Jamaican proverb that says, hog don't pass water. You take what comes out. And I went straight into accepting the role, working in Stratford in East London. That was a fascinating place to be too.
Why?
We were expected to visit the factories and different communities around the area to gain and improve and inform our public health knowledge. East End of London has its own vibe and its own culture, and understanding first you need to understand the folk that you're dealing with, and the respect of their mores and their culture is critical to working with them.
When you say their culture, do you mean one culture or lots of cultures? It's a very diverse area.
Yes, different cultures, yes. And showing due regard and respect, recognizing we all came to England, but we brought bits of our country with us. And I can tell you, I work in England, but I go home every night to Barbados. In terms of food and what is on the telly and that sort of thing. Yes.
And, I mean, did people show you respect? Or was there a sort of challenge to a black woman telling people what they ought to do for their health?
Or I had my modes. I remember when I qualified from East London Polytechnic, I was then working at St. George's Clinic in Blackfriars. It was my second location. The first location was in Walworth Road. And that was quite encouraging. It was just up the road from East Street Market, so you got the best samples off the stalls. It also was where people helped you and showed you what was good. I had a mother whose babies were regurgitating quite a bit, and she was given a particular food to put in the milk, a particular addition. And she said to me when I visited, come on, Nola, let me show you what you need to do in case the next lady has this and you don't know. So we worked together to understand. From there, I moved to St. George's and the Walworth Road, in the Blackfriars Road. That was a different story. You had Peabody Estates, you had the different housing on the new developing part of the river, and you had a different kind of person that you deal with. Let me give you an example. I went to do a new birth visit, a key element of the health visitor's job. I went to do a visit. I knocked on the door of the block of flats as I got upstairs, and the mother of the baby let me in. I walked into the room, turned around to sit down, and the husband was sitting with a gun on his lap. National Front. And before I could say to her what I came to do and what I would help, he said to me, what makes you think that you can tell me how to bring up my child? So very deep swallow. And then I said, well, sir, I went to college for a whole year. During my time there, they taught me how I should observe for the development of babies, how to advise parents and mothers about things like feeding and sleeping, baby sleeping, and the growth and development, how we measured. So for 10 minutes, I explained my position to him. He relaxed and turned the gun away from me. I then turned to the mother and told her about the times of the clinic, what we would do, how we would weigh the baby, how we would chart its growth, and how we would help her to understand the developmental process as she was a first mom. When it was finished, I got up to leave and I thanked them both for letting me help them with the baby. And I stumbled downstairs. You would have thought I would have gone back to the clinic and get a cold flannel and go all needy. No, I went on to my next visit. And this time, it was a friendly mum. As I knocked on the door and she let me in, she said, oh gosh, Nola, if you weren't black, I'd say you're grey. I was just drained of energy. She sat me down, made me a cup of coffee. And when I collected my thoughts and my feelings, I proceeded to share some of the information. However, I went straight back to the clinic and phoned my boss to tell her about my encounter. And we came up with a plan. I would do no further visits on this first family. I would write to them and invite them to the clinic. But new policies had to be developed for the safety of staff. It was a sobering time, but I didn't think, well, that's it, I'm going home. I just got on with the job. I cracked on, knowing that one sparrow didn't make a summer. One difficult family didn't decide a caseload.
So you were saying that when you first came to Britain, the NHS had only been going for about 15 years.
That's right.
You sort of fast forwarded a bit. We're in the 70s now, and the 70s and 80s, and you were talking about policies. Now, did that become, as the NHS was evolving, did it become much more process and policy driven during that time?
Yes.
And do you think that's a good thing?
I think so, because if you're working and you're working outside of a government policy, you're practically doing your own thing. The policies are developed to ensure that standards are kept and delivered, and that changes that happen in a uniformed way. So more and more policies were being distributed, and you had to understand that it wasn't just words on paper, it was the equivalent of direction of travel, how it would evolve from where it had been to where it should be. And taking that on board, it was critical as professionals that we adhere to them. Yeah.
Was that a kind of universal view, do you think, then? Or do you think that was a sort of evolving approach? Because obviously didn't have the internet to see what other people were doing at the time.
No, we didn't even get to the internet. It was a change in government happened around that time, a change in policy. I became a health visitor when Barbara Castle was the Minister of Health. That's way back, we're talking 70s. So her policies were around then, although public health became very much part of the new agenda for community. It wasn't enough just to get your immunization, but things like cytology clinics, the different kinds of learning disabilities had to be taken on board. It was working with the population. It was a population thing.
And do you think over that time people's expectations of what the NHS should provide or could provide grew?
Yes, the public became part of the, if you like, let's do this together. I was working in the community at the time, and it was, what could we do together? An example of this is, when I was at St. George's, one of the papers in Fleet Street closed down. And mums who used to come to my clinic was saying to me that their husbands were on their feet all day. What should they do? Well, I said, why don't we have a meeting with the husbands? And let's see how we can get them to understand what healthcare is about, what difficult sleeping baby that's not sleeping, what is the impact on family life. A house that don't sleep because of a crying baby is a powder keg. You need to have strategies and systems like turning down the lights, bringing in a more tranquil time so children can settle. So I set up my first male health group at St. George's Clinic. The difference is that they came in through the back door because they didn't want anybody to see them coming through the front door. I didn't mind as long as they came.
So you had room to kind of take the initiative and decide that this would be a good plan and let's try this.
Let's try this and see how it works. And I ran that for a year. By that time, things had changed and new jobs were got and there were no complaints from moms. And so life moved on. As usual, I was looking to see how else can I learn, what else can I bring to my work to make it satisfactory. And around that time, my then boss, who came to see me every month for an update and a report on what I was doing, told me she was retiring in 3 months' time and that I should apply for her job. That was a gulp, yes. And she said she wanted me to apply for her job because I wrote good reports on what I was doing. I always kept her informed around how things, and therefore she believed that I could do the job.
And what was the job?
Being a community nurse manager to my group, in the same group again. And so I applied for the job. I went for the interview, and I was appointed. I have to tell you, those interviews were hard. I had to demonstrate in a scenario what I would do if certain things came up, what might be the leadership tactic to support staff without imposing my will. I was tested, but I got the job.
Brilliant.
And my first task I was given was prepare her for a farewell party. And so I pulled together a group, the porter, 2 health visitors, 1 school nurse, and 1 somebody other, to plan the party. A group will plan with more insight than a single person.
And how long did you do that for?
I did that job for about 4 years. And by this time, the NHS was changing. General management had come into play. No longer clinical leaders were in charge. It was the Griffiths era, where general managers, people without clinical backgrounds, could apply for management and leadership positions in the NHS. And despite protests, it took off. And I was again looking to see how I could make an impact in this period. And on one particular day, I had a phone call from my clinical manager who told me that there were people from the Department of Health coming to visit my health center. And the reason they were coming, Channel 4 had done a program the week before on the distribution of drugs on this estate. And he told me that they were coming to get a first-hand knowledge of what life was like with the staff on the estate. Once again, I asked him when could I expect them, and he told me they were coming in June. June is a funny month. And I called a group of my staff together again to share that we would have these important visitors and what could we do to give them a background information. One of the health visitors said to me, it's a shame we don't have a report that we could share. That night, I went home and I hand wrote a report. The next morning, I went to my then boss's secretary and said, could you type this for me? And I need 6 copies, please. Sat and waited. That day, the important visitors came, as well as the top level of management in the health authority. Now, you would have thought that with all these people coming, I would hand the meeting over to the senior members. Not so. I decided that I would chair this meeting. And so I introduced my staff and invited them to do some presentations so that the evidence could be matched against the rhetoric. And the meeting was successful.
Yeah.
At the end of it, I said, I know you'll remember what we talked about, but I thought it would be good if we did a report, did a report, so that you would have it for reference. And so I shared the reports.
How usual do you think it was then for management to talk to people who were on the ground and work out a sort of evidence-based approach to what they were doing?
Not very usual, no. I don't think we had evolved that much in the NHS to go and get the evidence from the front line, as it were. We were a top-down rather than a bottom-up organisation.
Yeah. And do you think it's improved if it has more links between the 2 levels, the layers?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Those who do the work can describe it better than those who tell you about the work. And it was important to be inclusive, that it didn't seem as though staff were excluded from anything that reeked of focus and importance. I was keen that my staff got a share of the credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you became the Director of Nursing in Greenwich, didn't you?
Yes.
And I think you're right in saying you were the first black Director of Nursing in this country.
Yes.
And how did that come about?
With the changes that we were speaking about coming along, I thought I would go and apply for a job for interview practice. I thought there were going to be interviews for these new jobs. I would apply so that I could get into the habit of sitting across from a panel and experiencing what it was like. And so there was a vacancy for an Assistant Director of Nursing advertised in the professional magazine, and I applied and I was shortlisted. Now, being shortlisted was nearly good enough for me. It was like being asked if you may get an Oscar. I was shortlisted, and so I went along for the interview. But I prepared for that interview. I took the job description and the highlighter, and all that I could do and understood and know that I could do, I highlighted. And the gaps that remained is how I prepared for the interview. There were 7 people on the panel, Helen. No interview panel should have 7 people, for goodness sake. 7 people on the panel, and each asking me harder questions than the one before. But I was prepared. I had watched Dynasty and Dallas.
You're showing your age now.
Yes, I am. And I saw how the business and the managerial speak worked. And so I sat there and I gave my point of view. One particular question I got asked is if the Director of Social Services, if I wanted the Director of Social Services, who we work closely with, to undertake a piece of work, and I'd written to them and he didn't answer the letter, what would I do? And I said I would get my secretary to ring his secretary, and if nothing happened, what else would you do, Mrs. Ishmael? I said, well, I would try phoning him. What if you didn't get through, Mrs. Ishmael? I said, I'd try once more with a letter. He still hasn't come back, Mrs. Ishmael. What are you going to do? I would issue a letter of intent and proceed, I said. Did I know what a letter of intent was? No, but I thought to myself, this is enough. I'm going to do something. You ask me, and these are the steps I would take. So Greenwich was good.
And from there, you became a civil servant. Do you want to explain how that happened?
Okay. I'm at Greenwich and I'm enjoying the job. And my boss had resigned, and I was appointed Director of Nursing. And I'd gone to a conference and sat next to somebody from the Department of Health, and I was chatting to her about, this must be an example of networking that worked. I was chatting about the issues, the opportunities, and the challenges I was experiencing in Greenwich. And she told me about the policies that were being developed and invited me to come and spend a day with her at the Department of Health. I didn't rush back immediately. I waited for a week or so, and then we contacted each other, and I went in to see her. We talked again. She introduced me to other people, and then I invited them to Greenwich to meet staff, to see and hear firsthand what it was like to work in Greenwich. At the time, Greenwich had a few challenges like low staffing and child protection issues and that sort of thing. And so 3 people from the Department of Health visited me in Greenwich, and we gave them a whole day experience in Greenwich. About a month later, I had a telephone call asking if I would be interested in coming into the department to work for 6 months on a secondment. Ooh, I said, when do I have to answer? Within an hour. And so I left my office. I walked past my boss's office and went down to his boss. And I said, Bruce, I've just been invited to come to the Department of Health for 6 months. And Bruce said, well, that's a wonderful opportunity. You must go. And I said, will I have a job when I come back? And he said, as long as I'm here, you will. I didn't like that last bit, but I thought, okay. And then I walked to my boss's office. His name was Peter. And I said, Peter, I've just been invited to the Department of Health for 6 months. And Peter said, you can't go. And I said, Bruce says I can. And Peter said, you went to Bruce before you came to me? And I said, strategy, dear boy, strategy. And so I went to the Department of Health for 6 months to work on the first measles campaign and to ensure that school nurses were up to speed with what it meant with the processing and the delivery, and that vaccines will be in place when it started. Working with civil servants for the first time, I have to tell you, civil servants are a law unto themselves. There they were planning this campaign, and they were going to start it in August when the school was on holiday. Exactly. We soon changed that. And I worked for that 6 months, and then I was asked if I would spend the further 6 months at the department. I said yes, and then I cleared it with Greenwich. 1 year on, the chief nurse of England, Yvonne Moores, she's now Dame Yvonne, asked me if I would be happy to work as her professional private secretary. There is no handbook for this job, but I said yes. I ended things at Greenwich, thanked them for the opportunity, and I went into the Department of Health full-time. It was different. It was hard work, writing speeches for ministers, checking facts. You didn't dare write anything that wasn't a fact. If it was an opinion, you better say so, and whose opinion? You needed to reference and make sure that you had empiricals. Getting on with different professional organizations, Royal College of Nursing, Royal College of Midwives, Health Visitors Association, inclusion. Never daring to surprise an organization. Briefing was the midword. Have you briefed this person? Have you briefed that person? Does the minister for who has the responsibility for the subject, have you briefed? So briefing and providing the right level of knowledge was critical. Challenging, but enjoyable. Traveling, tiring, oh dear. Yes, but all the time, learning as I go. And while I was at it, I set up a mentoring and shadowing program.
Yeah, so tell us about that, because it's interesting about the links between practice and the department. Tell me how you started that.
I was concerned that staff in the NHS didn't necessarily understand clearly how policy and practice interlink. It was important that when policies became outdated, that you didn't use those old policies thinking you were working well, but you took on board the new policies as they were developed. And so on a weekly scale, more or less, I invited different nurses, midwives, to shadow me at the department to see how programs were planned, how systems were set up, and invited them to come in to understand more why it was important to apply the knowledge they have to the current situation. And over time, I would think I had about, 200 different people visiting and learning. Sometimes I would ask them to travel with me on different engagements out of London, which meant early starts. Early morning starts. I know about the milk train to Manchester.
So in that sort of career of first practicing and then working out how to generalize good practice and then how to create policy and share it back, what's your biggest achievement, do you think?
My biggest achievement, Helen, let me think. My biggest achievement is that I didn't go to the Department of Health, flunks around like I had arrived at heaven without having to die. I pull everybody with me. I encourage people to seek, to prepare for, and get promotion. I developed the Mary Seacole Award system at the department, which is still going.
So tell me about the Mary Seacole Award.
The Mary Seacole Award...
I suppose most people know who Mary Seacole is. We better say who she is.
The Mary Seacole Award started in 1994. At the time, John Major was the Prime Minister, and he had attended an event at the Windsor Fellowship, now called Windsor Leadership. And the Catholic bishops of Wales and Ireland and England said it's a shame that we hadn't done anything to commemorate Mary Seacole. So he came back.
And Mary Seacole was the black nurse who went with Florence Nightingale to Crimea and was then largely forgotten for quite a long time.
Quite a long time. And so the nursing department was charged with coming up with an idea that would commemorate Mary Seacole. And I was given the lead on that program. We were promised £250,000 over a period of time. And so we set up a program that would use £25,000 to enable a nurse, health visitor, or midwife to come up with a program of work that would benefit Black and minority ethnic people. And so for the first 10 years, I led that program, and 10 Mary Seacole scholars at the time. Many more have now come on board over the years, but it is still going. But it was the first piece of focused learning and development of BME people. At the time, Lady Cumberledge, Baroness Cumberledge, was the Minister for Ethnic Issues, and she had set up a meeting with Virginia Bottomley. See how far I go? Mm-hmm. She was the Secretary of State for Health, and she had set up a program looking at how BME people could work, could improve, and BME staff could improve their position in the NHS. The government had set up the ethnic minority unit in Leeds, and the women's health group at the time was working with how we could work with BME staff. It was a new thing. There were no ground rules written. We know that we had different legal BME laws passed and things had happened, but no change had happened. We hadn't seen a shift in mentality, a shift in understanding, or a shift in growth. And so these programs came on board. I was asked to lead in it and take on the ethnic issues policy element. And so we started with that, and then things evolved, and now we've got the RES unit and looking at the workforce equality system in the NHS. It's been a long, long haul, all the way from 1994, 92. Over the years, the different ministers and the different groups have moved, and somehow it seems as though sometimes we are treading water. But it's in the language now. We can say BME staff, we can say BME people, we can talk about it. The death of Stephen Lawrence helped to accelerate the reality of BME staff and people across the country. And so it's not anywhere near acceptance level. And if I were to gauge it in terms of a graph, I would say we're probably still just below midpoint. But nobody now writes equal opportunities working towards. Nobody can dare write working towards. You better be there.
Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask Nola? Yes, there's a hand just there. There's a microphone just coming. Just wait for the mic. Thank you.
Hi, I'm born in 2002, and I would like to be a doctor.
Yes.
And thinking forward, my career would start sort of 2025 and on for 45 years, ending a career in 2070.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for someone looking forward to another lifetime of development in the NHS?
Well, I like the question. Thank you. We're looking towards and working forward. You know what you want to do. You understand it's not going to be an easy ride, apart from all the hard studying and learning to spell those anatomical words. Making sure that you listen first. Listen hard. The clue is in the listening. What people say is not what you think they say. Hear the verb, everybody. Hear the verb, what they're asking for. And as you move forward, align yourself with people who can give you some advice. Find yourself a mentor. He or she will tell you as it is, not as you want them to say. They'll either tell you you're wasting your time and start again, or that this is on the right track. But the learning is your responsibility. Nobody can do it for you. But learn and ask. Dare to ask. I recently had somebody who was going for an interview, direct mailed me on Twitter to ask me for some advice for their interview. I chuckled. Look how far it has come. Nobody rings you anymore. They DM you and ask you. You're in a cyber world. When I was learning and reading, we only had reference books in the library if somebody else wasn't using them. You have the click ability. Go learn, write key points, and in your learning, come away with 3 things that you have learned or should learn. 4 is too much. It's overload. 3 points.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, you stunned into silence, Nola.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, it's all right. It's okay. Well, yes, there's a hand just here.
Thank you for your sharing so long experience with us. My question is, from your longer experience, what was the first time that you could say yourself, this is my idea, new idea, that I came to conclusion, even though it's against the other ideas, and how you deal with the other people, they don't accept your idea.
Thank you for that. I have a story. When I was in my second manager's post, I said to my manager, I think we should set up a group, a learning group for the next level down so they understand the terms and what we're doing and what we're asking them to do. And she said it was a good idea. The very next meeting that we had with all the groups of managers, she told the group that she would be setting up a new group and that it would be essential for the staff to learn what was going on, and that a colleague other than me would be leading on it. And so I said, when she'd finished speaking, I'm sure, Marjorie, you would want the others people here to know that I came to you with that idea and that I brought it to you. And here we are, and you're passing it on to someone else. Shall we start again? And she did. The concession was that the colleague that was made, that she wanted to lead on it, would be giving me assistance. I didn't say no. Every little bit helps. But not every black person has courage to upfront. No, I said upfront, not confront. To say, excuse me, but you will agree that was my idea. We have to learn courage and confidence to claim back your intellectual property, your ideas, your understanding of. And until we can get that done without confrontation or conflict, we will have problems. But be courageous. Say in as few words as you can, you will recall I brought that idea to you, or that I submitted that idea in a paper. Use your evidence to support your claim, is what I would say.
Thank you. Got a hand here.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Ishmael. My question would be, what's the progress that you've seen with Black women in the NHS in your 45-year career? Like, has there been like an upward progressive trajectory? So, yeah.
Okay. What's the progress? It's not very much. You heard from Helen that I was the first BME Director of Nursing, and that was in the 80s, 90s. All these years on, we've just had the first chief midwife, Jacqueline Bent. We're not excluded entirely, but it isn't a straight pathway. We don't go up the escalator. We have to have a history of performance. We have to have presence, research that says we did it, can do it, and can do better and more. So we have to prove ourselves still. It won't happen next year, the next year, but I wish to think that the generation to which my grandson belongs won't be talking like I am talking today. It isn't that we don't know how or that we don't know that. It's about the corporate mentality of those who think we can't do. You show and you tell. You demonstrate, but you don't yell. You go on. You perform to the best of your ability, and you get people to speak up for you. Make a friend before you need a friend, is what one Jamaican told me all those years ago. It helps. But we talk about a few. I used to think of myself as there is a circle with those who are in the circle, then there's an outer one, and then there's the fringe. Who's in the fringe, who's in the circle, and how do you get into the inner core? You get there by the history of performance, the papers you publish, the demonstration that you can do, that you know what you're talking about, the knowledge that you acquire. Let me give you a story. I was in the lift at Richmond House, which is the headquarters, was there, of the Department of Health, and a minister was on her way to give a speech. And she said, "Oh, Mrs. Ishmael, I'm glad I met you. How many," and she asked me questions pertinent to the subject that she was going to, had she asked before, I would have written a paper for her. But there and then, I gave her numbers, rationale, constraints, and opportunities, all in 5 minutes to support her speech. Years later, I'm at an event, and I'm chatting with a group of people, among which is this minister, and she said, "You see this woman here? You can ask her anything at any time, and she knows. Be that person." Okay?
Okay, I've got one more hand here, and then I'm going to let Nola have a drink before her dinner.
Oh, hello, my name's Patricia. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful career and all the insights.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with a couple of your fellow Barbadians
Ah!
from the Windrush generation. My mum was a mental health nurse for many, many years, and lovely Esme. They both worked in the NHS at some point.
Yeah.
My question is slightly off track. Have you had a chance or been invited to talk about your experiences in health as a nurse, etc., back in Barbados?
Yes. In 2003, I was invited to lead a workshop with the Barbados Nursing Association, led and supported by government then. It was an opportunity to go home and to to meet other nurses and to visit the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And yes, I led that workshop. It's on the internet. It's been an opportunity. I've also been able to advise one government minister whom in the last government, who I was Minister McLean. I've been in touch with her over the years about certain policies that she was developing in Barbados around elderly care. So yes, I've given back some. I was asked if I would come back and work, but I thought, don't they know I'm nearly 80?
Thank you.
Well, you never know. So thank you very much. It's fantastic and very interesting talk, and thank you for telling us about your career.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you.